Hello and welcome to Radical Engagements here at Barnblog. And today we are finishing up Big Data from Byung-chul Han, Psychopolitics. And you can hear me get more and more frustrated as we read. So far I've accused Han of Martin Baileying, of being correct but superficially correct, and bracketing out lots of history, and of hypostatization or reification, i.e., explaining causal agency through abstractions without explaining their logic, mechanism, or relationships. Okay, so you can tell I'm getting a little annoyed. We're at a section of the Big Data essay, the subsection called The Event. When the statistical method was discovered in the 17th century, asterisk, when the beginnings of the statistical methods were discovered and developed in the 17th century, because statistics has developed significantly since then, quote, it captivated scientists, gamblers, poets, and philosophers alike. Enthusiastically, they embraced statistical probability and regularity. There can be no doubt that such euphoria admits comparison with the fortunes of big data today. I don't know who's super enthusiastic about this now. Anyway, then statistics inspired renewed trust in the higher power for people as they confronted the contingencies of the world. For instance, an 18th century treatise by John Arbuthnot was called The Argument for Divine Providence, taken from the regularity observed in the British births of both sexes. Finally, an actual argument that's historically grounded. On the basis of the statistically determined predominance of male infants relative to female ones, philosophers saw the hand of God at work and found for the reason to justify war. Even Kant got carried away by the possibility that statistical calculation afforded. He incorporated the lawful order and allowed him to discern into his teleological view of history. You're going to mention Kant's teleological view of history, but not Hegel's? Anyway, on one hand, he pointed to the existence of free will. On the other hand, he restricted it. Yeah. Can't affirm the phenomena of free will, that is, of human action. No. You can't equate free will and human actions like that, Han. Are determined by general laws of nature like every other natural fact. Yeah, because it became very clear to him the problem. I mean, Kant, in some ways, is the first compatibilist. If one considers the play of freedom in the human will on a large scale, lawfulness may still be discerned. As unruly as the conduct of individual subjects seem to be, a, quote, steady progression towards slow development of original predispositions, there's ellipses in there, is recognizable at the level of the species. To make the point, Kant refers to statistics, long Kant quote, coming. The marriages, births that come from them, and deaths, since free will of human beings has so great an influence on them, seem to be subject to no rule in accordance with which the number could determine in advance through calculation. And yet the annual tables of them in large countries proved that they happen just as much in accordance with the constant laws of nature as weather conditions, which are also so inconstant, whose individual occurrence cannot previously determine, but which on the whole do not fail to sustain growth of plants, of course of streams, and other natural arrangements in uniform uninterrupted course. Individual humans and even the whole nations think little about the fact, since while one each pursues its own aim in its own way, and one often contrary to another, they are proceeding unnoticed as guided by a thread accordingly to the aim of nature, which is unknown to them, and are laboring at its promotion, unquote. In essence, the first enlightenment was committed to the belief in statistical knowledge. Asterisk. Just remember that Han is arguing that we're in a second enlightenment, one of dataism, which is an unreason. Just, remember that. Rousseau's volonté générale, general volition, results from a statistical mathematical operations. 2, the general will, takes the form without any communication at all. Thus, it results from statistical averages. Quote, this is a quote from where is this a quote from? The quote, part of this quote is from, so okay, we actually have a primary source here. Good. Because remember, when we're looking at ancient stuff, he was citing primary sources from secondary sources. All right. There is often considerable difference between will of all and the general will. The latter looks only to the common interest, the former looks to the private interest, and is nothing but the sum of particular wills. But if from the same will one takes away the pluses and the minuses, which cancel each other out, what is left is the sum of differences is the general will. So the general will is the aggregate. That's Barnes' gloss. And that's from Social Contract and other later political writings. Back to Han. Rousseau stresses the arriving at the general will requires no communication. Indeed, it excludes it. Communication distorts statistical objectivity. Accordingly, he would like to prohibit political parties and associations. Democracy he envisions as a democracy without discourse or communication. Proceeding statistically is supposed to yield a synthesis of quantity and truth. Rousseau offers a biopolitical response to the question of the features defining a good government. He avoids approaching the question morally. For him, the purpose of a political association is simply the protection and welfare of its members. The surest sign of success is the increase in population. Unquestionably for him, the best government is the one in which the sentiments become populous and multiply the most. Thus, he sounds a call. Calculators, it's now up to you. Count, measure, and compare. Rousseau, Social Contract, page 105. This is a good section so far. I've been less annoyed with Han here. Today's euphoria about big data strongly resembles the euphoria about statistics in the 18th century, including your own response to it, Han, where you're giving these people this, like you're saying that they'll be successful in a way that your own knowledge of statistics in the 18th century would indicate that they weren't successful, which did not last long. However, statistics was surely the big data of the 18th century. Sure, in so much that they both involve numbers. Before long, resistance mounted against statistical reason, above all on the part of Romanticism. The fundamental effect of Romanticism is hard, everything average and normal. The singular, improbable, and sudden stand opposed to what is merely probable in statistical terms. Romanticism cultivated the outlandish, the abnormal, and the extreme in order to counter statistical normality. See Manfred Snyder's a bunch of stuff in German. Nietzsche also shared this adherence for statistical reason. Long quote. Statistics proves that there are laws in history. Yes, it proves how vulgar and disgustingly uniform the masses are. How should you have kept statistics in Athens? You would have sensed the difference. The more inferior and unindividual the masses are, the more rigorous the statistical law. If the multitude has more refined and noble composition, then the law immediately goes to the devil. And way at the top, where the giant minds are, you no longer can make any calculations at all. When, for example, have great artists ever gotten married? You are hopeless. You who want to discover our law in this to the extent that there are laws in history, they are worthless. In history itself, that is, everything that has occurred is worthless. Nietzsche, unpublished writing from the period of unfashionable observations, translated by Richard T. Gray, Stanford University Press, 1995, page 108. I mean, that's some funny Nietzsche shit. Anyway, statistics does not take into consideration, quote, the great active individuals in the stage of history, but only the supernumeraries statisten. Nietzsche intervenes against a version of history, quote, that takes the great drives of the masses to be what is important, and that views all great men as merely as their expression, as bubbles that become visible only on the surface of a flood. Nietzsche, not the Glasner fragmenta. For Nietzsche, the figures of statistics prove only that man is a herd animal. He observes that die Menschen zunehmen in Gleichwerden. This means both that people are increasingly growing equal and that people grow fat as they become the same. Such Shelton also characterizes our contemporary society of transparency and information. Asterisk. Of course, Han would endorse Nietzsche. It's always an interesting, slight reactionary tinge to all this, isn't it? When everything is made visible at once, deviations can scarcely occur. They occur all the time when everything's made visible at once. That's what fractals are. You can see both the aggregate and the individual. The aggregate has patterns, the individual doesn't. I don't know why this is hard. Nor can you draw what Nietzsche tries to draw, any great moral judgment about the irregular or the unique. It's a strange metaphor, Han. Transparency entails a compulsion to conform, which eliminates the other, the alien, and the deviant. That's all capitalized. However, you can't know what the other and the alien and the deviants are unless you know there's an urge to conform. These false binaries are false. Above all, big data makes collective patterns of behavior visible. Dataism is augmenting. Zunehmen im Gleichwerk are the hypertrophied sameness. Data mining does not differ from statistics in a fundamental way. It's kind of based off it. So, yeah. The correlations it lays bare represent only what is likely in statistical terms. Yeah, but so do most things. I don't know how you think that's a critique, Han. It calculates average values. No, it reports average. I mean, it calculates what people value in average, but it doesn't calculate average values. Big data is wholly vying to the event. Aha. Now we have the intrusion of the Bedouin / Deleuzian event. Not what is statistically likely, but what is unlikely. The singular, the event, which will shape history. In other words, the future of mankind. Thus, big data is blind to the future, too. I mean, look, I'm sympathetic to the idea that there are black fronds and assumed normality and consistency, of course, is almost always a fatal error. But the idea that aggregate precludes understanding because it is dumb and cannot be narrativized because it is numbers or something, that's just nonsense. It's not true. It doesn't. The theoretical apparatus Han uses to construct it is based on a misreading of how we interpret and understand data, posited against a simplification of German idealism. And this is a very convoluted text. I mean, there are many things in it that are right, but the way it's argued are so wrong, even when it's making what I would consider to be a value statement, that it's hardly worth mentioning. I see why so many people get frustrated with Han. Like, this is very good if you work it out. If you're just reading this quickly, I could do a lot with this, and I could really work out a meaningful theory, and I could probably make this all work, but I'm doing the work, not Han. And so maybe we can argue that this is theoretically generative, and thus interesting in that way, but it's not theoretically clarifying. Anyway, I'm going to give Han a break. I wasn't expecting for this little essay to generate 4 episodes because I got so mad at it. Like and subscribe, hit the bell. I do a lot more on the other side of the Patreon. Have a great day.